much, and thank you so much, everyone, for staying to listen to this talk today. I hope it lives up to the expectations now. So, as Julia mentioned, I'm a dermatologist by background, trained with many of the eminent speakers in this room, very lucky to do so, and more recently I trained in nutrition as well. And my practice really is dermatology with the influence of nutrition, whether you have acne, eczema, psoriasis is my big interest, of course, as well. And Sylvia is our amazing PhD student. You've heard Sylvia speak already today. I won't cover the same thing that Sylvia's talked about, but this is a talk for people who live with psoriasis, who want to know how does food impact their psoriasis, what they can do, are there any easy practical tips you can take away today and start doing. So my talk is it does cover the science, but the focus is really on practical tips for everybody. So these are my disclosures. So why does nutrition matter? Well, actually, it's not just psoriasis where food is so important, and it's lots of different skin conditions that people are very interested in the impact of food. We eat how many times a day? We've all just had a snack now, probably have breakfast as well, so we're eating 3 times a day. Obviously, we're going to think about how is nutrition impacting the health of our skin. And that is true whether you have eczema, acne, psoriasis. People want to know. This is the priority setting partnership which we alluded to earlier. These are the key interests of people who are doing research in these areas, as well as people who live with these various skin concerns. And it doesn't matter which of these you look at, people want to know about the impact of food. And with psoriasis, it really is the #1 priority. So why do people with skin conditions ask about psoriasis? Why does everyone want to know about it? Well, there's a lot of misinformation out there. If you look online, you will always see a new article about a new cure for psoriasis, where you might have some sort of diet that you can change. And obviously the worst offender, and the thing that takes up so much time in my clinic, is correcting misinformation from social media. And I don't have a TikTok picture up here, but TikTok is a real nuisance offender for misinformation on dietary advice. And of course, there are people who are going to make a lot of money from selling you things that will cure your psoriasis. And it's so difficult not to be tempted to go down that route, because psoriasis is a visible condition. Of course, we know it impacts your quality of life. People want solutions. And sometimes they're kind of thinking, well, I don't really want to use a cream all the time. I don't want to take a tablet. Maybe if I did this juice cleanse, I could get rid of my psoriasis forever. It, unfortunately, is not that simple, and we'll touch on what would be more helpful for psoriasis. So really, the work that we do at King's, and our team is made up of, obviously, dermatology, Professor Chris Griffiths as well. We have professors of nutrition science. We have a gut health team that we work with as well. And, of course, lots of dietitians and nutritionists. It's a growing team, and really, we want to replace nutrition nonsense with evidence-based guidance that will be helpful for people who live with the condition. So where does diet fit in? And a lot of this applies to psoriatic arthritis as well. We know that psoriasis is linked to a number of different cardiovascular conditions, whether that's high blood pressure, but also fatty liver disease as well. And diet is the #1 way to address all of those potential comorbidities. And there's a huge interest in the gut microbiome. We have ongoing projects looking at the gut microbiome in a number of different inflammatory conditions. We have one paper which is in progress at the moment. This is the question that comes up all the time. Can I clear my psoriasis if I clear my gut, if I look after my gut health? That's something I'm asked on a daily basis. And what about nutritional deficiencies? We know that vitamin D is important. We use it topically, but we also need to check if you're deficient in vitamin D. And if you are, we want to replace it. And what about exacerbating factors? We know that alcohol is an exacerbating factor. We've heard that from our recent talks as well. But what about the role of dietary exacerbants as well? And finally, obesity and the link of weight and psoriasis severity is an important one that has really been coming to the fore. Lots of work that's come out of Guy's and St Thomas's, particularly on this area. Really interesting the way that we can incorporate this into our holistic management of psoriasis. So why does diet matter? We know that psoriasis isn't just a skin condition now. We're really thinking of how it can affect other aspects of our health, whether that's metabolic syndrome, as I mentioned, raised cholesterol, whether that's fatty liver disease. They share a lot of inflammatory pathways. They share a lot of the same inflammation. And diet and lifestyle, if you were to go to a diabetes clinic, if you went and saw someone with high blood pressure, I just sent someone to a fatty liver disease clinic, and it came back with a Mediterranean diet leaflet. And I thought, that's what I've been telling you all this time. Sometimes you need to hear it from somebody else. But we all are really singing from the same hymn sheet. We all are talking about the same type of diet, and that is one that is easy to adopt. So let's talk about weight first of all, because it's the tricky one. It's a difficult topic to talk about. People struggle with losing weight. It's something I see in clinic all the time, and it's a conversation that we really need to be very careful about. You can't say to someone, look, you just need to lose some weight and you'll cure your psoriasis. It's absolutely not that. Weight is very, very multifactorial. What causes someone to change in weight is very different from one person to another. It's the environment that they're living in, and there's lots of research that we've done on this in our clinic as well. And we know now that carrying extra body weight may be linked to more severe psoriasis, particularly if your BMI is over 30. And BMI is always criticized in nutrition research as not a very good indicator of health. There are other better indicators of health. You could do body fat percentage, for example, and body muscle percentage. That would actually be more useful. But we use BMI because it's easy to access, because it's very difficult for GPs to have these sort of anthrometry material machines that you stand on that will measure your body fat percentage. We have them at King's, of course. We use them for research, and everybody who entered our trial would have had that done. But those machines are actually very expensive, especially the accurate ones. So that's why we go back to BMI as being the measure that we tend to use. But not just is it linked to more severe psoriasis, but also it can influence how well your treatments are working. So, for example, if you are carrying extra body weight and perhaps you may also have a bit of fatty liver disease, that may then have a knock-on effect on how well your medications can work. So you might end up with liver function tests that start to go up when you start certain medications, for example, acitretin, which some of you may have taken, methotrexate, and some biologic therapies also may not be as effective if you are carrying extra body weight. So there's a dual impact of body weight on psoriasis. And what about, does weight loss help? And this is a lovely paper that Sylvia mentioned as well from Sapphire, Marhill at Guy's. And we know that, yes, you can see a significant improvement in your PASI score if you are able to lose at least 5% body weight through calorie restriction. It's very important to remember this is for people whose BMI is outside of what is considered the healthy range. It does not help if your weight is within the normal range. We do not advise you to then go and try and lose more weight. That's very important to remember. But that doesn't mean you can't change your diet and take a more healthy lifestyle. Absolutely not. Everybody can adopt a more healthy lifestyle. So yes, we understand that there's this relationship, but weight loss is difficult. And having had conversations about this over the years, it is a very difficult conversation. It's very difficult for people to have sustained weight loss. And if they do it, it's amazing. And they feel so empowered by it. But if they're struggling with it, you don't want it to become the thing you're always talking about in clinic, because that is really something that people don't want to come and see you again. If you're always telling them off about their weight, that's a really negative relationship to have in the clinic. So, moving on from weight, well, we can't really talk about weight and not talk about the new weight loss drugs for psoriasis. I'm very excited that there's going to be research in this area from Guy's and St Thomas's. And the big question is, do these weight loss drugs actually work for psoriasis? And I'll talk a little bit of my own experience in private practice where I don't prescribe these drugs, but I have lots of patients who happen to be on them. I have had some patients not come back to clinic, and I've kind of been like, did you think we had a rubbish consultation? You don't want to come back and see me? And then I rang, I've had this happen a few times, and I rang them and said, oh yeah, but I went to see someone about my weight, and they started me on this drug, and my psoriasis is much better now. And I wouldn't say, look, this is not the cure for psoriasis, but it's very interesting that there is observational studies out there that perhaps these drugs may be helpful for weight loss and therefore psoriasis as well. And in fact, it was quite a big topic of conversation at the recent Gene to Clinic conference that's organised by Professor Barker and Professor Griffiths as well. And something I really took away from that is that we really need to be thinking about how these new weight loss drugs play a role in the management of psoriasis. And so this is really quite an old study, and at some point I've lost the reference to this, and I'm very sorry about that. And this is a patient who was started on a very commonly used weight loss drug. He was actually already on a biologic therapy, and over a course of 10 weeks, actually, although he hadn't responded very well to his biologic therapy, his psoriasis substantially improved. Now, that's interesting, but we're thinking about somebody who's lost weight who's on a biologic therapy. Is that therapy working better because there's less of him for that biologic therapy to be working on? So that question, this paper didn't necessarily answer that. But there have been conversations about these drugs. I'm talking about Ozempic, Mounjaro, you would have heard these names, that have been going on for quite some time. And we think that the way these drugs work is beyond, what we're seeing in the skin. They seem to have a lot of profound effects internally. For example, fatty liver disease. They're working on insulin sensitivity. They're working on heart function as well. So it's very interesting how these drugs are working beyond just weight loss. And perhaps in psoriasis, they could be potentially very useful. If somebody, for example, has fatty liver disease and has psoriasis and has living with obesity, perhaps there is a role for these drugs in that sort of setting. And it is not surprising that the people who make a very commonly used biologic therapy and also happen to make very commonly used weight loss therapy have trials ongoing to see if these drugs will be helpful with people with psoriasis and people with psoriatic arthritis together. So the study is called Together. This is by Lilly. Lilly make ixekizumab. Maybe some of you are on ixekizumab, but they also make Mounjaro. So it makes sense that they want to see if these medications together could be helpful for weight loss and psoriasis. So interesting studies. And in terms of access to these medications, they are very difficult to get hold of. They're not freely available for everyone by any means, and they need to be prescribed very carefully by people who know what they're doing. And I have seen people who have started these medications and come to see me, and I haven't started them, but I'm aware that they're on them. And they're sort of like, well, I've lost loads of weight, I'm really happy about it, but what are you eating? Well, I used to eat a whole pot noodle, now I eat half a pot noodle. And that is not healthy, that is not helpful, and this is not how these drugs should be used. These drugs should be used with very important dietary advice in conjunction with a nutritionist or a dietitian. You need to make sure you have adequate protein intake. You need to be sure to be incorporating all of those healthy lifestyle things. And that will eventually perhaps be able to come off the drug if you're using it as a springboard for healthy lifestyle change, not just quick fix to lose weight. And I think that's where the big disconnect is with the use of these medications, which is very important. So in terms of how individuals can access these, they have very much been restricted to weight loss management services. And I'm fortunate I work alongside an expert who runs a weight loss unit and send patients to her very often. But more recently, they've become available, very recently, in fact of last week, to primary care for high-risk adults. And you need to have a BMI of greater or equal to 40, as well as 4 comorbidities, at least 4 comorbidities. And those comorbidities do not include psoriasis at the moment. I don't know if that's going to change. That would be very interesting. But at the moment, that is where these drugs are available. So if you have been thinking about these medications and you think that this is something that you would like to try, then this is something that your GP would now be able to prescribe if you qualify for these medications. And they have side effects. We all have heard the stories of people who've developed pancreatitis and all sorts of side effects, dehydration, ended up in hospital. They're not to be taken lightly. You don't want to just buy them online. If this is something that is recommended to you, then it needs to be prescribed properly with the appropriate nutrition advice that should always go along the prescription of these medications. So this is really the weight loss bit done. Now we're going to move on to other dietary things that will be useful for lots of you to think about as well. So what about gluten-free diet? I was talking to a couple earlier who were telling me how they've recently found success with a gluten-free diet. So what's the evidence for gluten-free diets in psoriasis? So people with psoriasis are much more likely to have celiac disease, which is a true gluten allergy. And maybe some of you do have celiac disease and psoriasis as well. The evidence as it stands is that if you have celiac disease and psoriasis, or if you have blood tests positive for celiac disease and psoriasis, it is worth you trying a gluten-free diet. If your blood tests for celiac disease are negative and you have psoriasis, it doesn't seem to be beneficial to remove gluten from your diet. And that's very important because people have often thought that a gluten-free diet is healthier. It isn't actually, because a lot of the gluten-free foods are processed rice and processed corn, and they often have a higher impact on your blood sugar than their gluten-containing counterparts, for example, whole grain pasta, which is what we were sending everyone on our trial. So I wouldn't immediately adopt a gluten-free diet as a healthy alternative. Gluten-free foods are more expensive as well, and gluten-containing whole grains are actually better for your gut microbiome. So it's something you need to consider carefully. Who would have a celiac blood test? if you eat wheat and get quite a lot of bloating or stomach upset or diarrhea, or if somebody in your family, a first-degree family member, has celiac disease, then it is worth that blood test being done. And that would be the first level of screening to see whether you had celiac disease and whether a gluten-free diet would be useful. And it's something I ask about in clinic as well. I always ask the question of bloating and family history of celiac disease to find out whether that is a useful blood test to do in that individual. And the recommendation from the National Psoriasis Foundations in the States, yes, if you do have those positive blood tests, it is worth trying a gluten-free diet. So gluten-free, not for everyone, very specific situations where it would be used, and can be really helpful in individuals who really need it. And if your blood tests are positive, if you have celiac disease, going gluten-free can make a big difference to the management of your psoriasis, and it's something that we have several case reports of that being the case. So what about the gut microbiome? So this is actually a huge area of research at King's. We work with lots of people who have really developed a lot of what we know about the gut microbiome, and we're very fortunate to do so. So your gut microbiome, sitting there as it is now, probably weighs about 2 kilos, trillions of microorganisms, some of which we can name, some of which we are less good at naming. They're viruses, bacteria, there's some fungi in there as well. It has enormous impact on your overall health and well-being, your appetite, your brain health, your immune system. Gut microbiome shifts are associated with depression, anxiety, obesity, how hungry you are as well, very much have a big role to play in appetite, and a myriad of other autoimmune conditions as well. And we all know that lots of your immune system is regulated by aspects of the gut microbiome as well. So it's a very important aspect of our overall health. And I would say in psoriasis research, we have quite a way to go before we have a very clear understanding of the role of the gut microbiome. Eczema, we have more data, particularly in children. That's a lot further down the line. But we are nowhere near our colleagues in gastroenterology. For example, people who have certain types of inflammatory bowel disease will be recommended a specific probiotic. That is in their NICE guidelines, and that would be recommended for a period of time. So we're not at that stage yet where we can say the evidence is good enough that we can recommend a specific probiotic to you that's going to really help with your gut. That doesn't mean that you can't look after your gut health and that it isn't important. So what is the data on probiotics and psoriasis? As I said, we've got a big study on probiotics and multiple skin conditions, which is in the process of being, is under literature review, it's under review at the moment. And at the moment, there have been some trials looking at probiotics and whether they're effective in psoriasis. All of them showed that there was a benefit, but there is a big caveat. This is a big but. All the studies had a big placebo effect. That means even the people who were taking the fake probiotic thought their psoriasis was better. And we don't know whether, when you're taking a fake probiotic, you think, oh, wow, I'm going to start eating really healthy, I'm going to do exercise, I'm going to drink less alcohol. Are you doing other things that could change how your psoriasis looks at the same time? And the studies were all quite small, and Sylvia's talked earlier how sample size really matters. And they all had different species of probiotic as well. Each one used a different probiotic. So we're not really at the stage where we can say to you, look, it's great, take a probiotic, you know, your psoriasis is going to be fantastic. Does that mean you shouldn't try one? They're very safe to try. You could try one if you wanted. It's safe to take while you're on biologic therapy, as we've learned from all our colleagues in IBD, whose patients are on infliximab every 6 to 8 weeks. Probiotics can be taken alongside your current treatment. Some people can see a little bit of stomach upset, depends which one and how many billions of species. I would say if you're choosing one, 5 to 10 billion colony-forming units is what you want, and about 7 to 10 different species. And those are readily available. If you're going to try it and you want to know if it's improving your psoriasis, you need to do a proper experiment. You can't be changing everything else in your diet. You can't, because you won't know if it really helps. And you would need to do it for at least 6 to 8 weeks, I would say, to notice a benefit. In my experience, I am yet to see somebody come back and say, my psoriasis is tons better since I started a probiotic. I am yet to see that. Maybe they're not coming back because they are better. I don't know. I don't want to, dismiss it entirely. They might not. But it is worth scratch your own itch. If you want to try it, give it a go, absolutely, and see if it helps. Some people come back and say their gut symptoms are much better, they're much less bloated. So how can you actually support your gut microbiome? And this is a much better way to support your gut microbiome. And this is really going to deliver better results at improving the number of good bacteria in your gut compared to the number of bad bacteria. And that is really, Tim Spector and the Zoe team talk about it all the time. increase your fruit and vegetable intake. You want variety. Try and include some fermented foods. And I was speaking at a BDNG meeting very recently. We're talking about what probiotics foods people like, and it's very individual. Some people love all of it. I don't love sauerkraut, but I'm happy to have kimchi. Some people love kefir. You know, it's very different, but you can try these things. I would say, when I have a patient in the clinic who doesn't like any of these things, I would say try a kefir for breakfast with some fruit, maybe some nuts and things like that. And that would be the most palatable one, I think. And it's a good way to introduce extra good bacteria. Then you have all the foods called prebiotics, which feed the good bacteria. And of course, we don't want to cut all those carbs. There's a big trend for removing carbs from your diet. But all of those whole grain foods are excellent. They're full of fiber, which feed our good bacteria. So they're not things that I recommend cutting out. And as Sylvia has mentioned earlier, try to eat within a window. Try not to eat too late. Try to make sure you're not late night snacking. That's another thing that's come out of our research as well. And that eating within a window actually helps good bacteria to thrive as well. So really, a lot of the work that we've done is on the Mediterranean diet and psoriatic disease. And there are studies that people with severe psoriasis show lower adherence to the Mediterranean diet. This is a very large French study called the Nutrinet Santé cohort. It's an ongoing study. They're always collecting nutrition research. Thousands and thousands of participants. They've done lots on acne as well. And this is another one for psoriatic arthritis, for those of you who have psoriatic arthritis as well. Mediterranean diet is also very important for mood, and you'll see from Sylvia's data, people were happier at the end of the study who'd been on a Mediterranean diet. And there's been a lot of research on the Mediterranean diet and mental health and well-being as well. So that is more research to come, I would say. So in terms of the studies that have been, the closer you adhere to a Mediterranean diet, some of these studies have shown the less severe psoriasis is, and that seems to be irrespective of body weight, which we've spent the first part of the talk talking about already. And the foods that seem to come out time and time again from these studies, including our own, olive oil and fish seem to come out again and again. And, you know, you saw us sending huge bottles of olive oil to our patients as part of our trial, and also sending oily fish. And people always think salmon, it's expensive. Tinned fish is just as good. So we were actually sending quite a lot of tinned mackerel and sardines to our patients who were on this study. Not everyone loved everything, let me just say that. But we tried. And so here's some really lovely resources for you on the Mediterranean diet. And as I say, we're all singing from the same hymn sheet, whether you're diabetic, British Heart Foundation, Heart UK. And what Sylvia didn't tell you is that she has created this huge amount of useful information for people who live with psoriasis. Meal plans, recipe books, eating out, eating on a budget, how to freeze food. I mean, the list is endless, and the amount of work, I can't even tell you. It's hours and hours of work creating very useful resources for people who live with psoriasis on how to bring a Mediterranean diet into their lifestyle. And this is really taken from talking to people every 2 weeks who've got psoriasis and are trying to incorporate these dietary changes. And this is something we're very happy to make widely available, because it would be nice to have our own link here. Psoriasis Association link nutrition leaflets, and Sylvia's done so much work that we could easily provide those resources that I think would be really helpful. And they've all been made in conjunction with a nutritionist, a dietitian. I've chipped in a bit, but I can't tell you that I've done all the meal plans. I mean, I have worked with such clever people that I've really just been in awe of how much dedication there's been to putting this together. Healthy meal swaps, you know, if you normally get this bread, what would be a good alternative? Making it easy to make those swaps, which is super important. And so we've already talked a little bit about some of our research. I'll just touch on the Apple study research. I'm very aware of time. That is a much bigger talk that Sylvia could come back and give at another point. But I don't know how many of you did the Apple study survey. Did anybody do it in here? So we did quite a big study called the Apple study, asking people with psoriasis about lifestyle and eating. It was a huge online survey looking at a lot of different aspects of lifestyle and diet. So when people participate in the study, they got a personalized nutrition report at the end of it, as well as an invite to a webinar, which Sylvia and I did. This part of the study is now finished, and Sylvia's just finishing all the last bits of putting it together, and I'm sure it'll be a very interesting final talk of her research that she's done so far. And so we did have very good recruitment. Actually, we had a lot of Psoriasis Association members complete this survey online. We looked at demographics. We used a self-assessed PASI score to look at severity. We looked at quality of life, exercise, sleep, alcohol intake, lots and lots of different factors as well. The timings of food as well. And for diet, actually, it's really interesting. People always say, how do you work out what people are eating? And there are lots of validated tools in nutrition research that look at what you're eating and how you're eating and what time. And I'll just show one, which is called a 24-hour dietary recall. And what participants were asked to do is fill this in on one day of the study. And you are put through every meal of your day, and you get to choose between all the different options. So if you have bread, you will get lots of different options for bread. There are more than this as well. And you get to choose the size and all of that. And this helps the research to be a little bit more accurate. And you know, people, and by doing it as a 24-hour period, actually, that is better than trying to remember it at the end of the week, because you'll probably still remember what you ate in a day. You can be a bit selective, and obviously there's always a bit that you kind of always want to appear healthier. So, you know, we always take that into consideration, and that is naturally a foible of nutrition research that we are accustomed to looking at. So what did we find? And this is just a few bits of the research. There is so much more that is, you know, being looked at and will be published and is under review at the moment. So in terms of what you're meant to eat versus what people with psoriasis are more likely to be eating. And so we take these recommendations from current guidelines from Public Health England, and what we found that people with psoriasis were eating less fibre, a little bit more sugar, more saturated fat, and less oily fish than what would be expected from the general population, and a study population and the National Health and Nutrition Database, where we can look at people's behaviour as well. So we can see some subtle trends just coming out from the early look at the data there. And fibre, as we've already touched on, is extremely important for gut health. Oily fish as well, important fat that we've touched on in other research projects, has been shown to be linked with less severe psoriasis as well. So we also asked people as part of this research, what diets have you tried and did you find them very helpful? And there was a huge list of diets that people could choose from, but I'll just take the top 3 that we found that people had tried. Lots of people had tried to lose weight, lots of people had tried dairy-free, and lots of people had actually tried a vegetarian or vegan diet. And we also asked them, you know, how would you grade how successful these were? Did you find them very helpful? And actually, it was really interesting that the dairy-free diet was the one that people really found to be more helpful. Now, this needs a lot more looking into. I wouldn't go and say everybody here needs to go dairy-free. Absolutely not. I've had people come to clinic who've tried gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free, everything free. They're just on not having anything except fruits and vegetables, and they still have very severe psoriasis. So I would say take this with a pinch of salt. We need to do a bit more work before we can come back to you and say this is a useful thing to try. So what can you do now? Back to the Mediterranean diet. Other findings from the Apple study, things that we found that people with more severe psoriasis and higher DLQI were having more late-night snacks of unhealthy foods such as chocolate, sweets, or biscuits. We also found an increased intake in this study, as well as another just accepted study where we looked at UK Biobank data. It's a huge repository of data where we found people with more severe psoriasis were eating more red and processed foods as well. So those foods, we know those are not best for our general health and well-being. So processed meat, in particular, increased risk to bowel cancer. So we want to be keeping that to an absolute minimum. Red meat, you want to limit that to once a week. And we found those who had less severe psoriasis, both in our research and our biobank research, has showed that increased intake of plant-based protein, nuts, and olive oil was linked to less severe psoriasis and lower TLQI scores. So again, back to the Mediterranean diet, but without the wine, please. So what is a Mediterranean diet? And somebody said to me the other day, is that sangria? No, it's not. It's not sangria. It's lots of whole grains. It's lots of fruit and vegetable, plenty of olive oil as your culinary fat. And when we did our project, we had to go around all the supermarkets to find where it was cheapest because olive oil prices have gone up massively. Oily fish, as I said, it could be tinned, it could be fresh. And really keeping red meat, sugary food, and obviously alcohol to a minimum where possible. So these are easy things you can go home and start doing today. And so really we are working towards, all of us we are working towards, whether it's through My Skin, whether it's through our research, we are all working towards a holistic management of psoriasis. And that is, yes, your food matters, looking after your mental health and well-being matters as well, skincare matters, and medical treatment matters as well. And you don't have to pick between one or another. You don't have to say, I'm only doing diet, I'm not doing any medical treatment. You can do it all together. You could do biologic therapy and a really healthy Mediterranean diet. And actually, you absolutely should be eating a really healthy Mediterranean diet, as well as doing medical treatment. So it's about bringing all these pieces of the puzzle together. And I really think that is the way that psoriasis is going to be best managed in the future. And you'll be happier, as well as having clear skin as well. It's that whole picture. Conclusions. So really, our research was trying to fill this unmet need, this question that everybody kept asking, is it my food, is it my diet? And what I have learned is that working with nutrition people is loads of fun, but also makes a huge difference to people with psoriasis. So I was the sort of person at the end of the study who would see how people had responded to their trial, but Sylvia was there all the way through with them. And they absolutely loved having Sylvia. Sylvia's amazing, obviously, but having somebody to support them through making dietary choices. You know, having these difficult decisions like, okay, well, I'm going out, I'm not sure what I can eat. Well, why don't you try this, this, this? So the absolute benefit of having a nutrition support person in your management of psoriasis, I cannot tell you how important that is. I actually think that's why people were so much happier at the end of the study, because, you know, she was just so fantastic. And I think really having the support of someone who really knows what they're doing with diet, you just cannot put a price on that, because a lot of you would have struggled with your diet. A lot of you would not have known what to eat. And a lot of you would think, well, can I cure it? Can I fix it like this? Maybe I'll try this. And having someone really sensible to talk to on a regular basis and really reassure you with regards to dietary decisions, I think it's just fantastic, and it really needs to be how psoriasis is managed in the future, along with everything else, all those new biologic treatments, all those new oral treatments that Andrew was talking about, all has to go hand in hand. So thank you so much to the Psoriasis Association for supporting us every step of the way, helping us to recruit patients, looking at everything that we were doing at every time point, and thank you everyone for listening.